Welcome to the Cancer Aware podcast, where we'll discuss cancer prevention, treatments, the latest in research, and important news around cancer. Brought to you by the University of Michigan Health Rogel Cancer Center. The Rogel Cancer Center has a strong history of leadership in the cancer field. 4 University of Michigan faculty members have served as president of the American Society of Clinical Oncology, a rare distinction that only 2 other institutions can claim. ASCO is the world's leading professional organization for physicians and oncology professionals caring for people with cancer. Today, we're joined by these 4 physician researchers and leaders.
I'm Alan Lichter. I'm a longtime U of M person, was chair of radiation oncology, then dean of the medical school, and then served for 10 years as the CEO of ASCO.
I'm Dan Hayes. I'm a medical oncologist. I'm the Stuart B. Podnos Professor of Breast Cancer Research, and I've been here about 25 years.
And I'm Lori Pierce. I'm a radiation oncologist. I was brought to Michigan by Dr. Alan Lichter, and I have been at Michigan since 1992.
I'm Doug Blayney. I'm also a medical oncologist, also brought to the University of Michigan by Dr. Lichter and other colleagues in 2003. I was ASCO president in 2009, and I left the University of Michigan shortly thereafter to join my family in California, and now live in Ann Arbor again.
And I was remiss. I was also brought to the University of Michigan in 2001 by Dr. Lichter, and I was president in 2016, 17.
And I guess I didn't mention my year. I was ASCO president in 2021.
And I was ASCO president 98, 99.
Fantastic. Thank you all for joining us today. Dr. Lichter, since you are the linchpin who brought everyone together, maybe we'll start with you. And can you tell us a little bit about what ASCO is? What does it do? What role does it serve?
Well, ASCO is a rather unique medical professional society. It was founded in 1964 at a time when there were no oncologists. The field did really not start formally until the early 70s. And ASCO, its founding documents specifically said this was not to be a society of solely chemotherapeutists, was the name that they used. It was to be for all cancer specialists. And so it formed as a unique multi-specialty society. And what's also unique is that the field of medical oncology, once it was established, simply forgot to found the American Society of Medical Oncology. It's the only specialty in medicine that does not have its own dedicated specialty society. It used ASCO, and it uses ASCO to this day. So we represent, in many respects, all of oncology, but uniquely represent medical oncology. Our role is really an educational organization, sponsor the most important meetings, publish the most important journals. We're interested in cancer policy. We're interested in cancer research, and all our work is dedicated to making cancer care better.
And you mentioned it's a society for medical oncologists, but you are the one who are responsible for the radiation oncologists joining in. Am I right?
Well, ASCO was fond of touting how wonderful a multi-specialty society it was. And one year at the annual meeting, at the business meeting, I looked up on the dais, the whole board was there, and I stood up and said, that's interesting, you're all medical oncologists, and yet you say this is a multi-specialty society. It stopped the conversation for a minute or two, and that was the end of that. And then some months later, I got a call, and they said, we're dedicating seats to surgical oncology, pediatric oncology, and medical oncology. And I was appointed to the board. There was not an election at that time, and I went from there.
You've told me, they said, okay, Mr. Smart Cow, you asked for this.
And I think you raise a nice point, Alan, because before I came to Michigan, I was in what was then called private practice, where we owned the practice, and we were responsible for getting patients and building a business, and we did clinical research in our practice. And gee whiz, why couldn't we have a voice as the private practice in this wonderful professional society? And lo and behold, we did, and it's worked out well. As you point out, the policy initiatives that have been undertaken, I think, have been good for everybody in that.
When I first got on the board, it had 12 members. I think it has over 20.
It's about 2022.
2022,
Right,
mostly
right.
because we've extended to community oncologists, to international oncologists, and so forth.
You were very convincing in your argument because by the time I came along, one of the things that really spoke to me about ASCO was how receptive they were to non-medical oncologists, how my voice mattered. And that was actually, while I have my own society, ASTRO, American Society of Radiation Oncology, which is very important, I really liked the fact that ASCO truly was multidisciplinary, and they seemed to really want my feedback. I like that very much.
Actually, to back up what Doug was saying, when I grew up, ASCO was basically filled with ivory tower, pinheaded medical oncologists who cared a lot about academics. And 65 to 70% of the patients in this country are not treated by academics, they're treated by community physicians. And what I saw when Lori and I were on the board together, but I saw Alan starting to recognize this and starting a whole committee for community oncologists and bringing in affiliates that had begun in each state to come in and actually meet with us. And you may not remember this, but you said I should be at those meetings when I was president. So I made a point of going to those meetings. And I think that really has changed the complex. Were you the first community oncologist?
Joe Bales was.
Joe Bales.
I was the second.
Former trainee of mine, on my side.
Yeah.
It's changed the complexion for the better. Academics are still very much involved in running a lot of it, but the one thing that Alan sort of hit on, we now have, I think, 45 or 50,000 members. I think
We're 50,000 plus.
Yeah, I think we're the largest professional cancer organization in the world. But the whole time I was on the board and president, we had discussions in the board. They were contentious at times, but they were never, this will help me buy a new boat, or this will help me get a fancy second house. They were always, what's best for our patients?
Yeah.
And that's what the community oncologists really were taking time out of their practice to be on that board to make sure we did things that would be good for our patients. I'm proud of that.
On the other topic, and we'll maybe get to this, but the multidisciplinary nature of ASCO was a model for the multidisciplinary care of the cancer patient, I think. And when my colleagues, as Dan and others, gee whiz, why should I be involved with ASCO? Because you'll meet some smart people in radiation and surgical oncology, and the pediatric kids doctors can teach us some things too. And when I came to Michigan, that was my introduction to multidisciplinary cancer care. And again, that I think speaks to that.
Docs have a unique ability to start dividing themselves into smaller and smaller entities. So there's subspecialty societies and subspecialty societies. ASCO has retained this very large
and a model for our practice, the way we practice multidisciplinary as well.
The diversity of opinion is so very important to you think outside the box and get different people's perspective. And ASCO, the makeup of the ASCO board now is very diverse in so many ways. Diverse in terms of disciplines, diverse in terms of race and ethnicities, in terms of geographics, and that whole that variability that really comes together in really coming together with a very inclusive set of recommendations from ASCO. I love that about ASCO.
So for each of you, what was your term as president like, and what issues did you focus on? What do you think has been the long-term impact of that work? Why don't we go around the room? I'm always inclined to start to my left. So do you want to start again, Dr. Lichter?
Well, when I became president, we had just recently hired our first full-time CEO. Prior to that, we were managed by a professional society management organization called FASTRO out of Chicago. We hired John Durant out of the University of Alabama, and we started to build a staff. So a lot of my presidency was involved in working on that, and it was a time where we focused a lot on clinical research, trying to get insurance companies and Medicare to pay for the routine costs of care. when you're part of a clinical trial, it's hard to believe that that was considered verboten at that time.
It was Medicare.
Medicare, and we were able to get that eventually passed. And the other thing that I recall so vividly is this was a time when assisted suicide in the late 90s was an active topic of conversation, and we did a lot of work on that, and especially trying to introduce palliative care into our work.
What do you think's been the legacy of what you started?
Well,
We don't have time. Because all of us are here because of them.
yeah, let's pass this around.
Okay, sounds good.
There are mistakes made, but
Do you want to go next?
well, I was not kidding. All of us are here because of Dr. Lichter, and the things he did in ASCO were astounding. After he was president, his staff, who were unbelievably professional, again, because of you, in my opinion, told each of us we had to have a theme. And so I think we had to go around. But my theme was just what ASCO can do for you if you're a medical oncologist or a patient or a radiation oncologist, whatever. We cover all these bases. And probably I think the 2 or 3 things that I really got out of it, besides having a great deal of fun, was the growing interest of global oncology, which really hadn't existed, and I've had very little or nothing to do with it. But again, because of Alan, and I began to understand that when I see patients in my clinic, my total in my career helped 1,000 women with breast cancer, maybe 2,000, I don't know. When I do some research, if it pays off, maybe I'll help 20,000 or 100,000. But as president of ASCO, because of the global reach it has, we were reaching millions of people. And that hit me about halfway through our presidency, that this is really neat. And that here I am at the University of Michigan, but helping millions of people around the world with the policies and the education and the research presentations. And again, something I was really proud of.
And Dan created a fellowship for international young medical oncologists to come to the U.S. and spend a year under mentorship of an academic in an academic center, and fostered the careers of dozens of bright international students.
It's just like this. We've had 18 people do this. They have to sign a piece of paper saying they'll go back home. We didn't want to start a brain drain. And their institutions have to sign a piece of paper saying there'll be a job for you when you come back home. We've had them from Africa, from South America, from Asia. I'm actually pretty proud of this one. And it's been fun to meet these kids. I guess they're not kids, but they already made it through the years. So that.
Oh, thank you. Well, my theme was quality. That really started when I came to U of M in 2003 from a private practice world and said, gee whiz, here's the University of Michigan. It's a top 10 cancer center, but we have to compete with regional and local. How do we do that? Well, among other things, it was let's measure our quality, the quality of cancer care that we deliver, and prove that U of M is better than our competitors. That is a long story, but eventually I published some work on quality improvement that we did here at the U of M. When I was ASCO president, I started, that was my theme. We ended up starting a meeting, and that's now persisted for 15 years. It's one of the only quality themed meeting in the world, actually, in cancer. It draws young people and non-physicians. We did that. We also expanded the Quality Oncology Practice Initiative, which was measuring quality, and we developed the
Explain that a little better because people won't know what it is. That's important.
Because you can't measure, you can't improve something if you can't measure it. And so the COPI measure, one of them, well, there are several that are quantitative measures of quality of cancer care. Not just I'm better than you because I'm at the U of M or whatever, but here's how our outcomes and our processes are better. As part of that measurement, we said, gee whiz, what is how do we measure quality? Well, gee whiz, everybody's got an electronic health record. Let's see if we can extract data from the electronic health record and use that to measure quality. That had some stumbles along the way. It may not have been the right time to do it, but others have done it and made a business out of it. So
But you began to certify practices,
who were
which really, in my opinion, changed a lot of what was going on.
because everybody wants to be better.
And
Yeah.
and I've gotten off of airplanes and airports in the middle of nowhere, and there's a big sign that says, come to our practice. We're ASCO COPE certified as a matter of pride for those practices. And I thought, that's pretty cool. Doug Blayney's
I'll tell you an interesting story. When I first became CEO, during the first week, I had some papers brought to me. Dr. Lichter, please sign these. I said, what are they? He said, this is to transfer COPE to the NCQA, the National Center for Quality Assurance, or whatever. It's, we're dumping it. And I looked and I said, I don't think that's a good idea. And I wouldn't sign it.
Well, God bless you.
So my presidency was unique. So my theme was equity: every patient, every day, everywhere. And I chose that theme because if you look at statistics, that certain populations of patients for almost every type of cancer do worse. And so I chose equity, not knowing if it would resonate. And then between the time that I chose it and the time that I became president, the pandemic happened. George Floyd happened. A lot of other things happened, and equity ended up being, the right thing. And it was, ASCO could not have been more supportive of that theme. And, I will go down in history as being the only ASCO president who never had an in-person meeting for the entire year because of COVID. Which is unfortunate in some ways, but in some ways it really highlighted the theme of equity, because we know that during COVID there were certain while everyone was affected, there were certain populations who were affected more than others. So I'm good with that, because I think it made a significant change in ASCO. And actually, during that year, ASCO has always been focused about improving care for all populations. But we upped our game a bit during that year. And one of the things that we did was we created a site self-assessment tool for enrollment in clinical trials, because we were very focused on increasing all adults in clinical trials. The pediatric population does this well. The adult population does not. So we created an instrument, which I won't bore you with the details, but basically the way I summarize it is, let's say you have 100 people who come into your cancer center and 5 go in clinical trials last month. Well, that's great. What happens to the other 95? What processes do you not have in place that perhaps institution A has, institution B does not? And so you individualize what you do. We also created the Oncology Summer Internship, which is a program I'm very proud of, which helps to bring all medical students and increase awareness of oncology and the importance of equity of care. And so the first year we had, I think, 5 institutions. This is now the 5th year. We have 14. The first year we had, I think, 29 students. Now we have 70. So institutions have to apply for that program. But if you're accepted, then up to 5 of your medical students finishing up the first year of medical school get to have this 4-week immersive experience understanding what oncology is all about. And they get to shadow doctors at their institutions. ASCO has a 4-week didactic plan. It is an extremely important program. And then I'll add one more thing, because I know I'm going over time. So I didn't know until today that when you were president, Alan, you were able to get Medicare patients to have routine care costs paid for as a part of being on a clinical trial. So during my presidency, we worked on Medicaid, because for patients who went on clinical trials, private insurance and Medicare patients would have their routine care costs covered. Medicaid patients were not. And so these were the poorest patients. And yet, if you needed to see the doctor, have a blood draw, whatever, they couldn't have that paid. But if they were treated outside of a clinical trial, they could have that paid. So it's a disincentive for Medicaid patients. So after years and years of advocating this with ASCO, it was changed during my year. So I was just so pleased that now all patients, no matter what type of insurance, have those routine care costs, so it's not a barrier to going clinical trials. So I was mentioning the oncology summer internship, and University of Michigan is one of the programs. We started participation in year 2, which was actually the year after my presidency, and this year will be our 4th year to have students. And it is so exciting, having now been a part of planning and creating OSI, to now be on the other side of it and to have students participating at the University of Michigan. And the feedback from students, it is so competitive because they apply to those of us who are leading the program, and we have to somehow select the students who will participate. And the enthusiasm for going into oncology, it is palpable. And so it's really great to see.
And Laura, you also helped lead the leadership development program in ASCO. One of the things that
Yes.
we wanted to do was to start to bring younger faculty members, practice members, et cetera, into a leadership development program and try to replace ourselves. And that has worked well. And Michigan continues to have people deeply involved in the society.
We as ASCO has been wildly successful. It's also very difficult to pick the people coming into that because of all of the amazing, oncologists who want to be a part of the LDP program. And University of Michigan in particular has had quite a line of successful participants in the LDP program. And yes, I was mentor of that for a few years.
This actually gets back to my theme, which was what ASCO does for you. And the reason I bring that up, this is one of the many things that ASCO does. Building a career in medicine in general, but especially in academics, is not easy. And one of the things that many folks who are especially in academics put on their CV to build their career is what they have done with ASCO. And Lori and I were reviewing what U of M has had. And in the last, I think, 5 years or 8 years, our Division of Medical Oncology, has had at least 25 of our faculty members be on either committees that run the science at ASCO, committees that review the grants, committees that develop educational programs, committees that go to the feds and talk about policies. And most importantly, maybe committees that write guidelines for how other doctors treat patients with cancer. And we have at least 8 of us, including myself, who have been on such committees that write guidelines, and several chairs of the guidelines, all out of U of M. And I know we keep shining Alan's shoes, but I think all this began with his being a president and then being CEO, and Doug coming in, and Doug talked me into going on the board or running for the board and then running for president. And I was really proud when Lori got nominated and elected. And then each of us has worked hard to get our younger people involved in there. The LDP program, at least I personally have had 3 former trainees, one current trainee, and 3 others. They're not trainees, they're young faculty members. And you've had 1 or 2?
We've had 2.
2?
Right.
In radiation oncology.
Right. Who've both gone on to be chairs.
And it's an incredible program.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my trainees who was in the LDP is now my boss. She's a division.
Well, I think the LDP program, I can't help but think it had its roots at the University of Michigan. When I came here in 2003 and Dr. Lichter was the dean, I was encouraged to go to the business school with my administrative counterpart and take a year-long course in the business school to develop leaders. Well, great. We tried it out at U of M, and now it's national. So there you go.
Laurie threw it out, but 2 of the LDP radiation oncologists are now chairs of departments at other institutions in this country.
The increasing number of medical oncologists who have been very active in ASCO committees and guidelines. Same with radiation oncology. I think over half of our clinicians are actively on committees or have been in leadership positions at ASCO. And I'm sure the same applies to surgical oncology. So Michigan is extremely present in the organizational structure of ASCO.
We're looking for the 5th president.
I got some ideas.
Can I step back to talk about quality? One more thing. So quality. When I first got looking into quality, I stumbled across a University of Michigan professor who wasn't an oncologist, Avis Donabedian, who was in the public health school. And he had the vision, somebody asked him, what's quality? And he said, well, quality is when you love your patient. Well, that sounds hokey, but truly, when you get down to it, you can measure it. But if you really love your patient and want to do the best for your patient, that's sort of the best short definition of quality I've come across. Another U of M plus.
Well, he founded the field of quality measurement. Before him, it didn't exist, and he brought it to life.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, what do you think it is about Michigan that has fostered this? You've mentioned this a few times, how you've pulled each other in, and then you're also mentoring the next generation and bringing them up. What is this? Is there a special environment here that kind of
It's so cloudy here. We never go outside. So we work constantly to try to
find something else to do?
Michigan is highly collaborative. And so when you have someone such as Alan and the leadership, and you collaborate together and you see the benefits of ASCO in this case, I think that all comes together. Michigan, the special sauce of Michigan is the collaboration. Look at the schools and colleges and the whole mentality. It is working together. And I think that's what you're seeing in terms of translating leadership from ASCO into future leaders of ASCO.
And I practiced medicine in Southern California and in Northern California and here in Michigan. And I agree with what Dr. Pierce just said, that it's very collaborative. The faculty are great, but also the community docs. There's plenty to do here. They work together. We founded here in Michigan, the Blue Cross Blue Shield has supported quality consortia. Lori has been leader of one. I led one for a while, and the community docs here really get along, and it's a compact enough state where you can really do experiments and understand what's going on in the community with your fellow docs. So I think that's part of the secret sauce as well.
We came here from D.C. I was at Georgetown, and the day we came to look at houses, as we were in the car going from the airport to Ann Arbor on tax day, April 15th, and it was snowing. And my wife didn't have a thing to say, and I finally looked at her and said, well, honey, April showers bring May flowers. Don't lose their snow showers. Actually, one reason I came here for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is because Alan was the dean at the time, and the man I worked with at Georgetown was coming to be chair of medicine and happened to be a good friend of Alan's in the first place. But the other is because although I grew up in Indiana, and I have 3 degrees from Indiana University, and I hated the University of Michigan based on sports alone, and nothing to do with academics, Ohio State, Purdue, and Michigan were all ranked at that level for me. The real reason is because this place was set up for people who want to do what we do, to do it and do it well, because of the collaborations that Lori laid out, and because the leadership believed in the missions of taking great care of patients and doing great research and teaching. And those are 3 things that all 4 of us are dedicated to, and we're allowed to do it and to do it successfully. And that attitude, I think, is exactly what we saw at ASCO, especially after Alan became the CEO, in my opinion. And we were allowed to take what we did here and expand it. As I said earlier, suddenly we're touching millions of people instead of tens or thousands even. And that is I know it sounds corny, but I think that's a really special secret sauce, if you like it, at U of M. Everything is here. All the schools are here so if I want to collaborate with the School of Engineering, in Indiana, there wasn't one. I'd have to go to Purdue, God forbid. But here, I can just drive 2 minutes and suddenly I'm dealing with engineers. I've had 2 or 3 grants with the engineers out here. School of Public Health is just across the street, and so on and so forth. And this place has been really special because of that. I don't know who set that up. You probably do, but it really made it a great place for me to accomplish what I wanted. And by the way, if I said we're going to move, my wife would divorce me. She loves this place now. I couldn't get her out of here with a crowbar. So,
I will say the closeness of the schools and colleges is our number one. It's our primary way that we're successful in recruiting people, having had a role in Central Campus. is that whole mindset is across the university. And so being able to work across schools, not having those silos, that is our secret sauce for sure. And I will also say
And the
clearly,
expectation of excellence.
and
I would
right,
say on top of that. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but yeah.
to follow up your comment, I'll also say that football was certainly not the reason that I came. Because I remember one of the times my recruitment trips, he took me to a football game. I was like, whoop-de-doo.
That did it, Lori.
Now I'm a football fan. No, had nothing to do with my decision.
He saw that coming.
Well, when
Right.
after I was here a year, I bumped into Alan. I said, Alan, the only thing that hasn't met my expectation is the football tickets. And he said, well, Doug, I'll send somebody around from the Victors Club to talk to you. I know it sounds like a lot of money, but you can pay it off.
Well, one other thing during my presidency is I talked about people just clamoring to do stuff for ASCO, who want to be on committees and stuff. And I had 250 open spots to fill, and I had over 2,000 applications to do that. And so I was talking to Alan's successor, Cliff Hudis, and said, this is crazy. People want to work for us, and we don't have a way to do that. And they want to work for free. They want to volunteer. And so he said, well, let's start something, and we'll call it Volunteer Corps.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, I like that. And so we set that up so that people from U of M, or anywhere for that matter, can go in and see what ASCO has to offer in terms of what they want to do, the committees and all these sorts of things. And then they can specifically say, well, I want to be on that committee, or I want to do that. Whereas I had people calling me and saying, I want to do something for ASCO, but I don't know what to do. And I think,
It created a bench for ASCO.
yeah, I think it's been pretty successful now to help both ASCO figure out who to choose, but also the people in the different centers and institutions and community about what are the options that they could do, the opportunities. So I think that's been pretty good.
So sort of setting itself up for the next generation, or for future leaders, or for more people to
Sounds like we wanna
be.
replace ourselves.
Yeah.
So anybody else have any final thoughts? Are we poised at Michigan to continue this legacy of leadership? Do you think that we'll see more involvement moving forward?
Absolutely. I mean, the infrastructure is there, the mentorship is there, and you can see, you can predict, and we will have a fifth president.
I know who he is.
Sure. I'm sure. Yeah.
You know, I think it's safe to say that ASCO has formed an important piece of each of our careers. It certainly has been foundational in my career. Being president, at the time that I was president, the dean of the medical school left to become a dean elsewhere. He was the interim dean, and I had stepped down as department chair. And I was approached to be the interim dean, in part because I had a national reputation inside ASCO and had shown that I could lead organizations. And then I transitioned from interim dean to permanent dean. And then at the end of my deanship, ASCO called and said, would you like to become the CEO? So I spent, a critical 15 or 20 years of my life inside ASCO. It made my career.
And I'm looking forward, many of us are looking forward next week for the annual meeting. It's a big scientific meeting, and drawing people from all the oncologists and others from all over the world. I think one of the themes we'll see is that there's a lot more ways to treat cancer that are multidisciplinary, but also aren't just from the chemotherapists. There's immune treatments and all kinds of cellular-based therapies coming along. But it's been I think the theme is clinical research. It's important to find out how these treatments work in people in a structured, orderly way. Hopefully that will continue. I happen to believe I think I happen to believe and want to believe that it will continue, but also there's been a sort of a de-escalation of the treatments that are still effective but are less toxic. So I think, and again, that's been done in an experimented and ordered, structured way, so that all the treatments, radiation, chemotherapy, are less toxic today than when I think most of us started. So I think that's been something I'm at a very small part of, but we all had a part in that. But I think that's been a big boon for patients, along with supporting them through, frankly, a difficult time in their life and getting them through to get on with things.
At a time that we've seen a pretty major reduction in mortality from cancer, breast cancer mortality is about, not quite, but about half of what it was 30 or 40 years ago, again, with less toxicity. We can now cure 50% of patients who have metastatic melanoma with immunotherapies. I thought I would never say that. It's unbelievable. It really is something. When I got elected, I called about 10 or 15 of my buddies who had been presidents of ASCO, including two of them sitting here. Laura, you were, yeah. And I had a series of questions I wanted to ask. But at the end of the phone calls, then I said, okay, open mic time, sort of, tell me your biggest thrill. And almost every one of them said the saddest day of my career was when I had to quit being president of ASCO. And I think the four of us would agree with that. I hated to see it end. I just had a great time. And
Actually, I was good because I've continued to be very active.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm chairing other committees in ASCO. So I'm finding other ways to support ASCO. And actually, one other point, you asked us earlier, Nicole, what about our legacy? And I've been asked that before. And I think it's hard to have a legacy in ASCO. If you go to an organization that is so well run, it's hard to create a legacy in a year. And what you hope to do is to take a great organization and make it even greater. And I think the people around this table have accomplished that. So I don't know if that creates a legacy, but I think in our own way, we've left a mark on the organization.
But you can see, and all of you talked about different programs and things that you introduced that are still impacting the field, right, and impacting the next group of people who are coming along too. So there's a legacy there.
Pretty proud of that, actually.
And I don't think any of us would say my legacy is I did something monumental that led to a cure. I think it's the people we've trained and the people we've helped do that in the long run, treat people better or take better care of patients. At least George Canellis, when he was president, who was one of my mentors, and instead of giving a talk about how great research he had done, he talked about a lot of the things he had done like this. And at the end, he said his greatest clinical experiment were the fellows he had trained. And I was in the audience in tears. But I think that's how we all feel, is that the people we've trained and helped succeed are probably the biggest part of our legacies. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but
that's a part of it, for sure.
So thank you all for your time today, for your service to the oncology community, and for the impact that you've had on the field and on people with cancer.
Thank you for listening, and tell us what you think of this podcast by rating and reviewing us. To stay up to date on what's happening in the cancer world, follow us on X at Rogel Cancer. You can explore additional episodes at www.rogelcancercenter.org/podcasts. CancerWare is part of the Michigan Medicine Podcast Network.